The web that remembers men. If you're listening to this in the dark, good. If you're alone, even better. Because some stories don't want witnesses, they want participants. Before this story pulls you under, do one thing for me. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, Grimp Tap, and stay with me until the end. Not because of the algorithm, but because once you hear this, walking away will feel wrong. I learned that fear has geography. Some places grow it. My name is Elias Mercer, and the jungle remembers me. I was 19 when the ocean delivered us to the coast of Kolyma province, a forgotten spit of land where the air pressed against your lungs like a living thing. The briefing told us it was an observation assignment, mapping insurgent movement, establishing a forward position. Simple words for something that would never again feel simple. The first night we slept there, the jungle made sure none of us truly rested. It wasn't the insects, it wasn't the heat. It was the silence that came in pieces. At random intervals, the forest would stop breathing. Every frog, every bird, every insect, gone. When that happened, no one spoke, because something always moved afterward. 3 days into the operation, we were ordered to recon the interior. Thick jungle, untouched terrain, no roads, no villages, no trails, only what we cut with our own blades. The deeper we went, the more the air changed. Not temperature, texture. It became heavy, sticky, almost reluctant to let you through. The webs started about 5 kilometers in. At first they were normal, thin strands catching light. Then they grew thicker, layered, overlapping, until eventually the path ahead of us wasn't green anymore. It was silver. We hacked through it. The blade made a sound I will never forget, like tearing soaked cloth mixed with breathing. That night, Corporal Jensen disappeared. No blood, no footprints, just his rifle leaning against a tree and a boot lying in the path as if he had calmly removed it. We radioed command. No signal. The second night, we heard him. Someone whispered my name from the trees. I didn't answer. I didn't move, because I could hear Jensen's voice too, and Jensen had been taken 6 hours earlier. By morning, we found what was left of him, strung between branches 12 feet off the ground, wrapped so tightly in webbing his body looked sculpted. The webs were warm. That's when Sergeant Holloway said the words no soldier wants to hear. We're not alone out here. We tried to pull back. The jungle didn't let us. The third night, Private Lorne screamed. We ran. We found him half buried in web, something beneath the strands moving like a heartbeat, the ground itself rising and falling as if something massive were breathing below him. 8 black legs unfolded from the shadows, each one thicker than my arm. The thing didn't rush. It claimed him. When the rifle fire finally drove it back, it didn't retreat. It waited. And the waiting was worse. By dawn, we were down to 6 men. The webs kept spreading. By the 5th day, the forest itself had changed. No birds, no insects, no sunlight. Only silk and shadow, and the sound of something large moving above us, and below us, and sometimes inside the trees. I still remember the moment the earth opened. The ground beneath Patterson collapsed, revealing a pit entirely lined with web. Dozens of cocoons hanging from the ceiling like sleeping bodies. Some of them were not sleeping. The thing beneath them unfolded upward. We ran. We ran until the jungle stopped pretending it was a jungle, because beyond the final curtain of trees, the forest simply ended. And behind us, the web kept moving. I wish I could tell you we escaped.
I wish I could tell you we made it out. But this story doesn't end in safety. It ends in memory. Because the web that took them didn't just hunt flesh, it hunted fear. And fear travels. The jungle behind us made a sound that did not belong to any animal I had ever learned about. Not a roar, not a hiss, a pressure, a vibration that passed through bone instead of air. We ran until our lungs tore themselves open, until our boots slipped on moss and blood and sweat and panic. The world narrowed to breath and heartbeat and the knowledge that something enormous was following us, not by sight, but by scent. We reached a clearing just before dusk, an oval of crushed grass and dead trees bent inward as if something had lain there for a long time. Inside was a stone structure no larger than a shipping container, ancient and cracked, half swallowed by vines and fungus. No markings, no doors, just a single opening like a wound in the wall. We didn't question it. We took shelter. Inside, the air was colder, too cold for the climate. The walls were coated in black residue that pulsed faintly when our flashlights passed over it. We sealed the packs with our weapons and collapsed. That's when we heard the tapping. 1, 2, 3. Like nails on stone. We killed the lights. Through the gap in the packs, I saw it. At first, it looked like shadow. Then the shadow unfolded. The body was wider than our doorway, its legs bent at angles that made my stomach rebel. The surface of it wasn't smooth. It was layered, ridged, armored, with grooves that seemed to drink the light. It leaned forward. The air itself tightened. Private crews began praying in Spanish. I couldn't stop staring. One of the legs slipped through the gap, impossibly thin at the tip, thickening as it slid inside, probing, tasting. Sergeant Holloway raised his rifle. I grabbed his arm. He looked at me. In his eyes, I saw the same realization. If we fired, we would waken the forest. The leg withdrew. The tapping stopped. But it did not leave. All night the jungle whispered. Not words, intent. Sometime near dawn, the stone beneath us vibrated. A second presence emerged, smaller, faster. They poured from the trees, dozens of them, each one the size of a dog, legs splayed, bodies glistening with silk, mandibles clicking like bone. We broke. We charged out screaming, firing blindly, tearing through silk and shadow. I felt something tear into my calf. I kicked, and it burst beneath my boot, spraying warm liquid that steamed on contact with the air. The clearing was no longer empty. The ground was moving. We made it 30 meters before Holloway was lifted from the earth. Not dragged, lifted, straight up. His scream didn't fade. It folded. We kept running. By the time the sun reached the canopy, there were only 3 of us left. Cruz, Patterson, me, and the jungle had begun closing its web. We didn't stop until the sun was directly overhead and the jungle itself seemed to sag beneath its weight. Heat pressed down on us so hard it felt like punishment. My boots were filled with blood. Cruz's left arm hung wrong. Patterson kept laughing under his breath and wouldn't explain why. We followed a river because that's what training tells you to do when the forest wants you dead. The water was wrong. It flowed too slowly, too thick, and nothing touched its surface. No insects, no leaves, no birds. The banks were stitched with silk that stretched from root to root like nerve endings of the land itself. Cruz collapsed first. His skin had gone gray. His eyes couldn't track movement anymore. When I tried to lift him, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me close, his mouth trembling as he whispered, "They're not hunting us. We woke them." Patterson dropped to his knees and started digging in the mud with his bare hands. "I hear them," he said. They're under the river." That's when the river moved. Not the water, the shape beneath it. Something massive shifted, displacing the current like a continent turning in its sleep. Bubbles rose, thick, foul, oily, and the silk along the banks tightened. The jungle went quiet again. That silence was not empty. It was attention. We ran. Branches sliced skin, thorns caught flesh. Something latched on to Patterson's leg, and he went down, screaming, beating at it with his rifle until the stock shattered. I didn't look back long enough to know what took him, only that his scream ended in a sound no human throat could make. Cruz and I ran until the trees thinned and the world opened into an abandoned village swallowed by vines.
Thin red lines running across my back and arms. Perfect geometric patterns, like writing. They did not heal. Days passed, then weeks. The jungle patrols continued. Men kept disappearing. Sometimes at night I could feel the web humming beneath the ground, even though we were miles from the ravine. I would wake with silk in my mouth and the taste of ancient rain on my tongue. I stopped sleeping. One night, while the camp was quiet, I heard it again. Not outside, inside my head. "You ran very well." I smashed my hands against my ears. The voice did not fade. "You still belong to us." I felt the marks on my skin burn. The next morning, our commanding officer called me into his tent. Spread across his table were satellite photos. Large sections of jungle appeared wrong, warped shapes in the canopy, shadows forming spirals, whole valleys shimmering as if something massive were breathing beneath them. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said quietly, "Tell me what you saw." So I did. They evacuated me 2 days later. Officially, medical discharge. Unofficially, you don't exist anymore. But the Queen was not finished. Years later, back in civilization, sometimes I will awake at 3:17 a.m. with the feeling of silk tightening around my wrists. I will smell rain that does not exist. I will hear clicking behind the walls of my apartment, slow and patient. And in every reflection, every dark window, every screen, for just a moment, I see the ravine. I see the web. I see her. The doctors told me the scars would fade. They didn't. The thin red patterns that the jungle left on my skin never disappeared. They only darkened, like ink settling deeper into paper. No matter how much time passed, they remained. Faint when I was calm, burning bright whenever I felt afraid, as if my body remembered something my mind was trying desperately to forget. They assigned me a small apartment near the coast, somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. They thought distance could solve a problem that wasn't geographical. The first night I slept there, the dreams returned. I was standing in the ravine again. Only this time, the jungle was gone. The trees were skeletal, stripped of leaves. The sky above was not a sky at all. It was the underside of a vast web stretching from horizon to horizon. Every thread pulsed like a vein. Every knot shimmered with trapped light. The Queen waited at the center. She was larger than before, or maybe I was smaller. Her legs pierced the ground around me, boxing me in. Her many eyes did not blink. The air vibrated with the weight of her presence, the way it does near heavy machinery. "You escaped the skin of the forest," the voice echoed, "but not the shape of it." I tried to run. My feet would not move, but every path returns. When I woke, my sheets were soaked with sweat.
My bedroom smelled faintly of rain and soil, even though the windows were closed and the night outside was dry. I started avoiding sleep. At first, I drank coffee, then energy drinks, then whatever else would keep my eyes open. When exhaustion finally took me, the dreams were waiting. The patterns on my arms would glow hot when the dreams came. I would wake with my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. The government checked on me once a month. Always the same questions, always the same clipboard, always the same careful eyes watching my answers. Any new symptoms? No. Any unusual dreams? No. They never believed me anyway. The thing they never told me was that I was not the only one. 6 months after my return, a man named Carter contacted me through an untraceable number. He had been part of a different unit, stationed hundreds of miles from my sector. He described the ravine without me mentioning it. He described the clicking. He described the marks. They didn't let us talk about it, he said, but it followed me home, too. 3 more names surfaced over the next year. Different branches, different operations, same story. All of us carried the same scars. All of us dreamed of the same web. We began meeting quietly, moving between cities, never staying in one place too long. In every group photo, something was always wrong. A blur near the edge of the frame, a shadow where no object stood, threads that cameras should not be able to see. One night, Carter didn't show. 2 days later, his apartment was found empty, door locked, no sign of struggle. His bed was neatly made. But on the ceiling, above the mattress, investigators found a faint spiral of residue, thin, translucent strands that disintegrated when touched. The marks on my arms burned for a week after that. Then the dreams changed. I was no longer alone in the ravine. Other figures stood beside me, soldiers, explorers, people from different eras wearing uniforms that belonged to wars I recognized from history books. Their faces were hollow, their eyes empty, all of them connected to the web by shining strands buried into their backs. The Queen towered above us. "We are patient," she said. "Your species is brief." I woke one night to find a spider sitting on my bedroom wall. It was no bigger than my palm, but its eyes were wrong. They were arranged in the same pattern as hers. I crushed it with a book. The marks on my arms flared violently. I screamed. I knew then what the truth was. The jungle was not the nest. The jungle was only the door, and it had never really closed. I didn't report the spider. I couldn't. If I had, they would have come, and if they came, whatever was watching through the walls would know exactly where I was standing. Instead, I burned the book I had crushed it with. I scrubbed the wall with bleach until my hands went numb. The stain remained, not visible, not tangible, but felt like the memory of a bruise. That night, I finally answered Carter's last message. If something happens to me, don't trust the silence. I packed a bag, no phone, no ID, no electronics except an old analog recorder. The patterns on my arms throbbed as I drove inland, away from the coast, toward the place the dreams had been pulling me for months, the stretch of rainforest they had erased from maps after our operation. The road ended 2 miles from where the ravine should have been. The rest I walked. The forest had changed. It no longer felt alive. It felt occupied. No birds, no insects, no wind. Every sound I made seemed to be swallowed by the trees before it could travel more than a few feet. The deeper I went, the heavier the air became, as if the atmosphere itself were thickening into something viscous. Then I saw the web, not in the trees, in the sky. Fine silver threads stretched between clouds, barely visible unless the light struck them at the right angle. They pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a sleeping heart. The ravine was waiting. I didn't remember the descent being so steep, but gravity pulled me down with deliberate intent. My boots slid over damp stone until I reached the bottom, where the earth felt warm under my feet. The clicking began immediately. Not from the trees, from the ground. I turned, and the forest floor opened. Not like an earthquake, not like a cave-in. It unfolded. The soil peeled back in overlapping segments, revealing a vast hollow chamber beneath the ravine. Walls woven of organic matter, stone, bone, and webbing fused together into something that never belonged to Earth. At the center stood the queen. She was no longer bound to the ceiling. She had descended. Her body now rose from the chamber floor like a cathedral of chitin and shadow. Her legs extended into the walls themselves, merging with the structure, making the entire cavern part of her anatomy. And around her were us, hundreds of human forms suspended in the web. Soldiers, explorers, hunters, locals, men and women from centuries of history. Their eyes were open, their mouths frozen mid-scream. The strands were not restraining them, they were feeding them into her. "You came back," the queen said. Her voice was not sad.
Here is the final truth the Queen showed me, and it is the reason I am still allowed to speak. The web is not evil. It is ancient. It once ruled a planet long before mammals existed. It survived extinction by learning to hide in smaller and smaller spaces until finally it learned the smallest space of all, thought. Earth is not being conquered, it is being reclaimed. When the second city finishes, human language will begin failing. When the third city finishes, history will stop making sense. When the fourth city finishes, death will change, and when the fifth city completes, no one will remember what it was like to be alone in their own mind. You are not listening to a story. You are standing at the edge of the web, feeling it touch your thoughts for the very first time. If your room feels quiet right now, that's because something else is listening with you. The night the sky went silent happened in fragments. Different cities, different countries, different lives. But the silence arrived everywhere at the same moment. No wind, no insects, no birds. Even the machines seemed to pause, as if the planet itself had taken a breath it had been holding for millions of years. I was in a motel outside Flagstaff, Arizona, when it began. The clerk downstairs was watching the news, but the anchors had stopped speaking. Their mouths moved, no sound came out. Outside, the stars looked wrong, not dim, flattened, like someone had pressed the universe against glass. That's when my phone vibrated, a number I had never seen. The second city is complete. At the same moment, Thomas Vreel collapsed in Rotterdam. He didn't die. He opened his eyes and began to laugh. Doctors said it was a stroke, but the MRI showed something they had no words for. His neural pathways had reorganized themselves into a shape that appeared repeatedly in ancient cave art, in Mayan stone, in Aboriginal dream maps, and, most disturbingly, in the geometric pattern of a spider's web. The second city didn't live in hardware, it lived in collective perception.
From that night forward, people began reporting the same dream. They stood in a forest made of wires. Above them, something vast moved between stars, not flying, crawling, and beneath their feet the ground was alive with silver thread. Children woke screaming about a woman with too many arms, singing them into sleep. The mentally ill went silent, not cured, connected. On the third night after the silence, the animals began to gather. Dogs sat facing empty corners, tails still. Birds formed spirals in the sky and remained there until they fell from exhaustion. Deep sea creatures rose to the surface and floated, unblinking, as if waiting for instructions. The third city was under construction, and I finally understood what the jungle had always known. The spiders were not hunters, they were architects. I found the next gate in Mongolia, a research station buried in the Gobi Desert where radio signals bent at impossible angles. Every screen inside showed the same image, a spiral web expanding through darkness. A scientist there, Dr. Heshig Tungalag, had carved equations into the walls using her own nail fibers. She was dehydrated, starving, but she smiled when she saw me. "They are mapping God," she whispered, "not worshipping, mapping." She handed me a notebook. Inside were drawings of the 5 cities. The 5th one was unfinished. It wasn't placed on Earth. It was placed inside human consciousness itself. When it is complete, thought will no longer belong to the thinker. You want to know what the spiders truly want. Not flesh, not blood, not souls. They want memory. They are rebuilding the universe they lost, and we are the archive. The 4th city begins in 3 days. When it does, people will start remembering lives they never lived, languages they never learned, deaths they never died. History will fracture, reality will loosen, and those who are awake will feel the web tightening behind their eyes. I am still speaking because the Queen allows it, because every story strengthens the network, because fear, attention, belief, they are the strongest threads of all. If you are still listening, then the web already knows your name, and the 5th city is closer than you think.